Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program with myself, Martin Blackham. Natalie's behind the scenes today, but she says hello to you. We're the program that looks at news from Israel. We look at features and we look at the Hebraic roots. And we've just been to a conference this year called the Prophecy in the News Conference, Breaking Israel News Conference. Absolutely amazing, changing the scene of the news media in Israel. And the founder, I believe you're the founder, and publisher of Breaking News Israel is in the studio today, and that's Rabbi Tuly Weisz. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks, Martin,
Tuly.
for having
Great to have
me.
you with us, and fantastic. We really appreciate you giving your time to you at home, that you're going to learn so much today. And thank you so much for coming across and making the time to be with us in the studio for the Israel First television program. Now, you're originally from the United States, from Columbus, Ohio, I believe.
Right.
And you started off, you went to Yeshiva University, and then you also did theological seminary, and then you also did law school. But your family originally, I think your father was in the real estate business.
Right.
So you didn't go into real estate, you went into be the rabbi where your grandfather was. So how did that happen? How did you...
That was the other family business. Right, exactly. I grew up in Columbus, like you said, and I went to the synagogue that my grandfather was the rabbi of. He started the synagogue he didn't start the synagogue, but he served there from 1955, and he built the Jewish community up, certainly the Orthodox Jewish community. And
so were you known as your grandfather's, you were known as the grandson? Was that how the people looked at you?
Yeah, very much so, and there was big shoes to fill. So I grew up there as a kid. My siblings all went to that synagogue, and as well, my parents were worshipers there. And then he unfortunately passed away. I was finishing rabbinical studies here in Israel, in Jerusalem, and I got a call from the synagogue that they're looking now for a rabbi, and I was finishing, and they said, why don't you come back home?
So wasn't that quite daunting, because you that was your granddad had been there, and
Right.
he'd been there a number of years. It wasn't just one or two. He'd been there quite a long time.
Yeah, and he was a very special person who he was like the father and the grandfather for the whole community, and so everybody loved him. He was very beloved. My grandmother, who thank God is still alive and well and is living in Columbus. So yeah, it was very special. It was a very special thing to be able to sort of try to walk in his footsteps. And we were there for 5 years, and my wife and I were both very engaged in the Jewish community, obviously, but we also met, for the first time really for me, we met Christians who also loved Israel.
That was in Columbus or in somewhere else?
In Columbus. I was involved with some Jewish community events, and Christians would come, and who are these people who are not Jews, who love Israel more than many of the Jews in Columbus loved Israel? And so I started building relationships basically with other clergy members and community organizers, and was just so blown away by their sincerity, their love for Israel, their knowledge of the Bible, that I started teaching classes to Christians in Columbus while I was in Columbus. And then, I started studying the Bible.
Do you think that was unusual? Do you think, Tuly, that there's other people doing this, or was that very unusual what you were doing in Columbus?
Well, it was very usual for Christians in America to be supportive of Israel. It was less usual for rabbis to be interested in forming relationships. So actually, while I was still in Columbus, I reached out to my friends who were rabbis, not necessarily in the East Coast, but in places that in America is known as the Bible Belt, right? I mean, the Bible Belt, we know.
Right, which is for you at home, this is the typically the southern states of the United States. Is that right?
Right.
Or the middle states?
Yeah, the middle. I mean, the truth is America is a very Christian country. It's a very, very Christian country. There are Christians, in every state, obviously. The Bible Belt, obviously the joke is that the Bible Belt is really Jerusalem, Hebron, Beit El.
Right.
That's the real Bible Belt. But in America, they have
which is the mountains, I guess, the central part of Israel.
Right, like Judea and Samaria, Yehuda and Shomron, exactly. But there's a lot of Christians who love Israel throughout the United States. tens of millions, perhaps. And so in...
You know what? I think there'll be people who are watching and they're already thinking about inviting you, or is that possible? You're in the United States and there's groups, or there's pastors, or there's churches, or
Sure,
or even there may be a large organization who'd like to invite you. Do you speak? Can you be invited? And
yeah, happy to.
And they need to contact you at the website. That's the best thing.
Sure, yeah, Israel365.com, exactly. Yeah, and you know, I'm happier to invite them.
Oh, right, to come to Israel.
Yeah, and we're doing tours, and I speak to groups that are here, and I could go to them, but why?
It's better for them to come here. Sure. And to see the things.
It's a life-changing thing coming to Israel. For Jews, for non-Jews, it's just a life-changing experience.
Now, you were there with your family. You become the rabbi of where your grandfather had been the rabbi for many years, and you went there, and then suddenly you decided to come to Israel, or had it been something you were thinking about?
You know, I'll tell you, it's a great story, because I was, like I said, I was the rabbi, and I started meeting these Christians who were interested in Israel, and I started teaching them, and it was like my first exposure really outside of the Jewish bubble. A lot of Jews grow up in an insular environment.
Which is for our friends and for you at home, it was for protection, because for many years there'd been persecution, there was fears of intermarriage and losing the Jewishness of the Jewish community.
Right.
So there was a reason that you were quite insular, was to protect the community.
Yeah, and it usually wasn't by our choice. You know, we didn't have the option of being invited to participate in the general society. We were not allowed to hold jobs. We were not allowed to own land. We were not allowed to do a lot of things that in Europe, it was a very Christian environment. It wasn't like there was a general culture, a secular culture. There was Christian culture, and then Jews were not invited to participate. And so we established our own culture that revolved really around the Torah, the Bible studies, and that, you know, has spilled over even in America, where it's obviously a much more open environment. So there's other concerns about intermarriage, and so Jews,
and kashrut and all sorts of things, that people were eating properly, and
exactly.
kosher food and things like that.
Exactly. Even a Shabbat, you know, if you're an Orthodox Jew and you need to walk to synagogue Shabbat, that means that you have to live within a kilometer of the synagogue. And so the Jewish people live very close in close neighborhoods, whether it's in America or in England or anywhere that there's observant Jewish communities. So there's that insularity that's really built in by a lot of the biblical laws like kashrut or like Shabbat.
Now, coming to Israel is a big thing, and you may not realize this, but it's not a simple thing. You know, you have to uproot your family, you have to find somewhere to live when you come here, either rental or to buy. You've got a different language, right. And you have to get, you might not realize, but Hebrew is the language of the documents, lawyers, you know, all the official documents are in Hebrew, right. All your paperwork is. If you want to telephone, you have to, you know, right. Suddenly you've got all these different things you have to do, whereas in America, right. it was completely different, and you have to uproot your family, find schools, so it was a huge move for you.
Yeah, and the truth is that it is a challenge for American Jews to make Aliyah. Most, you know, Israel, it's just amazing how many Jews have moved here and continue to move here, but for the most part they were fleeing persecution, whether it was in Arab countries or in Russia. You know, a million Russian immigrants came to escape persecution. So in America, because there's not persecution, so it's a real sacrifice that, you know, many of my friends and ourselves, you know, who left our family behind in America, so it is not easy. But it's, you know, it's not a reflection on, you know, being anti-American or ungrateful or not patriotic, but it's Israel is our homeland.
And so you'd felt that when you'd come here because you'd studied here, or was it something in the family? What was, do you think, the defining moment to come to live in Israel?
So I just started reading the Bible. And I went through it, you know, page by page, and I started to pay attention for the themes that were really jumping out at you. And the theme that jumps out on every single page pretty much of the entire Bible is the land of Israel. God's love for the land and the people's need to be in the land, and the promises and the prophets that the Jews will return to the land. So it's on every single page. So I started going through my Bible, underlining all of the references to Israel. I came upon a Bible verse in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 12, that says that Israel is the land that God's eyes are on from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. And I was like, wow, what else, where else does it say what God does every day?
Now, as we said at the beginning of the program, you launched the Breaking Israel News, which the website's on the screen. And so how did that happen? Was that something you decided in Columbus you would do? Oh, this is what I'm going to do when I come to live in Israel, or?
So, I read that Bible verse that Israel's the land that God's eyes are on from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. And I had this idea every day we need people to also put our eyes on the land from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So we moved here exactly 6 years ago, August 2011. And I started I went to Ulpan to learn Hebrew for a few months if you come to live here, it's a language school and quite intensive, really. I know that some people end up crying, because they really work you very hard there. With the Hebrew, but it's a vital part of absorption.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a vital part, I think, of just connecting with the land. The Jewish people are most natural in our land, speaking our language, and so it's a vital absorption process in a practical way, but also in a spiritual way. So I came upon this verse, and on January 1st, I dropped out of Ulpan, and I started Israel 365 from the beginning of the year until the end of the year.
365 is different from Breaking
Israel News.
Israel News? In what way is it different?
So it started off, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, allowing people to connect with Israel on a daily basis. So it's just a simple photograph of Israel, to be like God and to put our eyes in the land every day, and a verse from the Bible. One of the verses that I came upon in my Bible studies, I underlined them all, and I made a spreadsheet, and every day I would just put out a little email and send it out to a couple of people with a Bible verse and a photograph of Israel, and pretty soon it started growing and growing. We now have close to 300,000 subscribers who get our email every day. So there's 300,000 people around the world whose eyes are on the land from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And then we realized that that our folks all over the world, they don't really know what's going on here. They're very interested in what's happening in Israel, but they're not necessarily reading the same news websites that I was reading. And even if they were and they're watching the BBC or they're watching the CNN, or they're not getting an accurate perception of what news is.
They're seeing the typical news feed of stones being thrown by, they think, they're told it's Palestinians, but they're not really sure. The stones are being thrown against Jewish people, and they don't really understand, or against the army.
Right.
And they don't really understand the full story.
Exactly. It feels sort of like a war zone, and just a place of religious conflict. But the reality is so different. This is a vibrant, booming place. We've turned the desert wastelands into gardens of Eden, and so we wanted people to sort of have a biblical perspective on the news. And so every day we would sort of just choose one news item, and then we realized that that's not enough. There's so much happening here, and so we started a news website, Breaking Israel News. You can check it out.
And if people would like to get involved with that or help, we're going to put it's on the screen now, the website. They can go there.
Yeah, anybody can subscribe. It's free, breakingisraelnews.com. And
it's an email, or how does it work?
Well, it's a website, and it's actually one of Israel's largest news websites in English. And we just started 3 years ago, but it's already one of Israel's leading news websites. And our perspective is not liberal or conservative, just biblical, just the biblical perspective on the news.
And people can go there every day and just catch up with the news and...
Yeah, a lot of people subscribe to our newsletter or follow us on social media, Facebook or Twitter, whatever. And we don't have, like you, a television show, but we have a lot of web visitors and email subscribers. So it's a way for people just to connect to Israel, to stay connected to Israel for free. And it's important that people are informed of what's really happening here. It's so important.
Now, you've got in the office, you've got a reporter and you've got an editor, and are they a bit overwhelmed, or how's that going?
We have a great staff. We have a great staff. We have editors and reporters and freelancers, and they are very, I wouldn't say that they're overwhelmed. I think that they're very passionate about, getting the word out to more people. God gave our generation technology, and he wants us to use it. And he wants us to use it and not be like the spies who came back with a negative report of the land, right? God wants us to give a positive report, to speak about the good of Jerusalem, to see the good of Jerusalem, like it says in Psalms. And that's what we're trying to do, and our staff is very, very committed to that. And it's a challenge. We have, every day we have an editorial meeting, Breaking Israel News, and we talk about what's happening in the news that day, and what is our angle, what's the biblical angle, who could we speak to, which experts, what leading rabbis can we speak to provide us a greater perspective. The Temple Mount, for example, has been in the news a lot recently. And a lot of people will say, well, to really understand, the current fight over the Temple Mount, you gotta go back to when Ariel Sharon went up, and then the Intifada started. And that was in 2004, I believe. And others, in the news and journalism will say, no, you really need to go back earlier to really understand the Temple Mount. You got to go back to 1967, where the city was reunited again. That's where the story of the Temple Mount really begins. When the IDF went in and we said the Temple Mount is now in our hands, Har Habayit Biyadenu, and it was that's where the story begins. And others will say, no, 1940. We say that to understand the Temple Mount, you got to go back to the Bible. When King David purchased the land to build the temple and Solomon built the temple, that's when the story begins. That's why it's important to us in the first place. And so we always are looking to provide the biblical perspective on the current events from Israel.
And I know that you're going to want to go onto the website and get the information, and we're making sure that that's on the screen for
Thank you. Yeah.
for you at home. Now, this year it's the 50 years of the liberation of Jerusalem.
Right.
Very exciting. We've had all sorts of events. President Trump came to Israel just before there was all the events, and you also had your Prophecy in the News Conference, Breaking Israel News Conference. Very exciting. We had the privilege, Natalie and myself, to be there. Very, very good conference. And you imagine you were able to invite all sorts of people were there to speak to the audience. We had member of Knesset, Rabbi Yehuda Glick was there. We had David Rubin from the former mayor of Shiloh was there, David Nekrutman. We had David Parsons from the International Christian Embassy. Fantastic guests. So many different people you managed to get together in one conference. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, these are newsmakers, people who are doing prophetic work, activities that are really bringing the Bible to life. And we had many those who cover the news, journalists, Chris Mitchell from the Christian Broadcasting Network was there, and we had somebody who flew in to be one of the panelists from the United States. His website, his name is Kate Hawkins from Prophecy Newswatch, and he is very similar to the mission of Breaking Israel News. He's always looking, to cover the news from his perspective, Christian perspective, and our perspective is, of course, the Jewish perspective. So we had newsmakers and those who cover the news to talk about prophecy in the news. A lot of people, don't even understand, what does that mean? You're predicting what's going to happen tomorrow in the news. And we were able to articulate, I think, a thoughtful vision for biblical news, for prophecy in the news, that it doesn't mean that we're trying to anticipate the future. What it means is that we're trying to give over a sense of hope that God is running the show here, and everything that you read about in the newspaper on a local level and on a national or global level is all, God's intervening in history for our benefit. And
now,
it's a very hopeful message.
Right. Now, have you seen anything developed since you had the conference? Has that caused things to happen? And
that's a good question. The conference was just a few weeks ago, and we got a lot of great feedback. And I think that we put up all of the videos on our website.
And that's on the screen. You can go there, and they can just click on the website and see the.
Yeah, and if you look, at our video section or our YouTube channel, we have all of the videos from that conference, and it was a beginning. It was a beginning, and in the Christian world, media has been around for a long time. Christian news channels have been around, like shows like this, have been around for a long time. And the Jewish community is not nearly as large, and so we're just starting. We're kind of the first here in Israel.
Wow.
To be, took 50 years of Jerusalem's Jubilee. It took Jerusalem's Jubilee year for us to figure out this idea of putting forth prophecy in the news from a Jewish perspective, and I think that it will resonate. And I'd love to see the sort of the mainstream Israeli media starting to take the Bible more seriously also.
Now, the Israel 365, which is another website that you're working on, and fantastic information, and it's also got a gift shop, I believe. You can, if you're at home, you'd like to get a gift from Israel. There's different things, isn't there? You've got all sorts of things on the website.
Yeah, it's a gift shop that's really, the purpose is to support Israeli artists or Israeli vendors. There's a lot of wonderful people who we're working with who are having a hard time just making a living here because of the BDS movement all over the world, especially in Europe.
Which is
and
the
America.
anti-Israel movement, really. The people who are trying to stop. Basically, it's people trying to stop other people from buying Israeli goods.
Exactly. It's very harmful. It's very, very harmful. Now the EU has rules that you need to label products that they were made in Judea and Samaria, and so people are going out of their way to boycott those Israeli-made products. And so our store, Israel 365's store, is meant to help support those Israeli artists and vendors and authors and musicians to sell their products. We have a woman who sells honey, and her honey farm was just entirely vandalized just earlier this week by Palestinian terrorists, and she lost everything. And now, because also Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, is just in a couple of weeks, and so we're selling honey from the land of Israel, the land of milk and honey, and so people are buying honey from Israel.
And can people buy that from overseas, or is it? It's online, isn't it? The shop.
It's if you go to if anybody wants to go to Israel365.com, so you'll see it right there, our store, and we're selling. Now is people are buying their Christmas presents already. So they're starting to think about that, and so we're definitely selling a lot of Judaica items from the Holy Land, gifts from Israel, special things. One of our more popular products is actually like a necklace with your Hebrew name, and we tell you the significance, the biblical significance, the Hebrew significance of your name, and we make necklaces out of it, or you could get a certificate which explains it.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Tuly, for coming in. Fantastic program. Great to have you with us. You're going to have to visit the Breaking Israel News website to get your news, and don't forget Israel 365 and the wonderful work that you're doing with the Christian-Jewish relations. And fantastic. So don't forget, you can see us this time next week for the Israel First television program.
Wonderful to be with you today. We carry on looking at the 7 species of the land of Israel, and today we are looking at the olive. The name in Hebrew is zait, and in plural is zetim. Now, the olive tree is the national tree of Israel, and also the state of Israel took the emblem of the olive branch, and also the menorah is their symbol. And so you can see the olive branch is showing for shalom, and the menorah is for the light, which is or in Hebrew. Now this tree, also the olive tree, we find some in the land because they can live almost forever, and even they are burned down, and this happened to many trees here. because when the Ottoman Empire was there, they cut a lot of trees. But the amazing things with the olive tree, they have some shoot who will come back, and many trees carry on growing. And when you go in Jerusalem and in the land, you can find some trees who are older than 2,000 years, which means that they were witnesses of what was happening in the time of Yeshua, which is quite amazing. Now, the fruit of the olive tree is a tiny little flower at the beginning around springtime, and it becomes a little green fruit, and then is like bigger and green, and at the end of the harvest it will be black. So we've learned already green, if you remember, is yarok, and black will be sharor. And again, with this olive tree, nothing is wasted. It can be used for wood, for cooking. The oil is used for the menorah, as we said. It can be used for anointing, and it was used for the anointing of the king and the anointing of the high priest. So it was a very special tree. Now, because the Jewish people are coming back here and they are doing archaeological dig, and they are finding many very old olive press, and the name is Bet Bad. And so we know that obviously the olive oil was used for cooking and was used for the menorah. Okay, so today we look at few names. We look at olive, which is zait. We look at the plural name is zetim. We look at green, which is yarok. We look at black, which is sharor. We look at the olive press also that we find all around the country here, which is bet bad. And this is all the things that we've learned this week, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Thank you so much for being with us today on the Israel First television program. We really enjoy your company. Don't forget you can email us at info@israelfirst.org. Visit the website israelfirst.org. And remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.